Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today Mañana. I'm Alex, and this is Michael Urpí. He's joining us today as our special guest host. And, you know, Xavier is hard at work at the office, which is our excuse.
No, that's not the truth. The truth is that he doesn't like alcohol, and he didn't feel like coming on and drinking. So I got the short straw, exactly, and I made the sacrifice.
Said, I will sacrifice and enjoy some Castle Hill cider today. So we're going to be joined shortly by Rob and Don from Castle Hill Cider. Rob is the general manager at Castle Hill Cidery. Don Whitaker, the cider maker at Castle Hill Cidery. So we're really excited to bring them on to the show today. As always, you know, we really appreciate being presented by Emergent Financial Services. We always love being powered by Sirius Craddock Insurance, by Castle Hill Cider, by the Gym CVille, by Aqua CVille Hand Car Wash, by Vitae Spirits Distillery, and by GBS Financial Services. And we are always with Forward Adelante, the premier Latino networking group here in Charlottesville, Virginia. So, I mean, great. Glad to have you with me.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's good to mix it up. So instead of father and son, we got brother and brother. Before this show is over, I should say, we'll have a little Urpí Bros extravaganza, because Nickolas Urpí, CMO of Emergent Financial Services, will join us a little later in the show to talk about just some retirement thoughts. Basically, I think he's got some data on what happens in retirement that people might not expect as far as their expenses go, which is kind of significant given where inflation is and so forth. And of course, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, our little game here with the audience is that anytime Don says terroir, or anytime Nick says inflation, you gotta take a drink. So we are prepared to.
So I imagine throughout the day the smiles are going to be growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Hopefully, by the time Nickolas comes on the show, we're not all sleeping. But
oh no, I don't think we will. But there's too much excitement going on for us to fall asleep before he gets on the show. So I mean, let's go right to it.
Listen, it's St. Patrick's Day. Let's get to the drinking, right?
Let's get to the fun part of the show, and then we'll deal with Nick later. So we are really excited to welcome to the show Rob Campbell and Don Whitaker from Castle Hill Cider. Rob and Don, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yes, coming on.
Thank you for having us. Are you kidding? This is great.
Always a pleasure to have you guys on.
Yes, absolutely.
Something we love. And so, I mean, to begin with, I mean, let's start.
Don's already just going to the big gun.
Exactly.
Let's just go for this.
That's like, it was such a nice setup. You know, we have to go. So, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, let's just get into it.
Let's just get into it. So what do you have for us today?
So what this is terrestrial. And this is a dry cider. And it actually just won a gold at Governor's Cup.
Wow.
So this year was, I believe, the 40th anniversary of the Governor's Cup, and we got a gold and a few silvers, and a lot of our friends that are cider makers and winemakers also received accolades, medals, awards, honors. So it was a very good showing for Virginia, obviously, but cider in particular, in the past, it was strictly a wine competition and a very esteemed wine competition. And I guess last year was the first year they opened up its own cider, has its own category now. And that was the first year.
And in 2018 was when they actually awarded the first gold medal to a cidery, which happened to be Castle Hill. So
the first ever gold medal.
So it was the first ever gold medal in this wine competition. So it was a big
it was
a big honor for us.
A huge honor.
Absolutely. And this is a significant competition.
It is, yes. I mean, it's our peers, it's our friends, it's a big tribe, and it's obviously a friendly competition. We take it seriously, and then it's really great to see what subjectively the judges liked, and what, it's in seeing where cider is moving in the palate vernacular of the consumer.
And how many ciders do you know how many cideries there are in Virginia?
Over 35, I believe.
Wow.
And that's really picked up in the past 5 years. I believe, it really kind of came onto the scene about 10, 15 years ago with Diane Flint, Foggy Ridge, and Albemarle Cider Works, and then Castle Hill, Big Fish, a lot of the orchard-based cideries, and then spreading out to Richmond with Buskey and Bluebee, and then Harrisonburg, Sagebird, Stanton. You've got Ciders from Mars, and it just keeps going. And then North Carolina's booming as well. James Creek, Botanist and Barrel, and then you get into South Kakalaki in Charleston and Ship's Wheel. So there's a big, strong showing of cider in the South.
That's impressive.
And it's growing.
Yeah, the category overall is expanding from, your typical ones that with the Bold Rocks, the Angry Orchards, more the sweeter style ciders to more of a orchard-based heritage type cider, which is kind of where it's an emerging market for us. So you're seeing a lot of these boutique cideries start to pop up, and so that's really what's driving the growth of these little small places that are doing amazing work. So it's fun to see how people with their imaginations and their creativity, what they can do with a little bit of juice and a little bit of passion. It's been amazing to watch.
And a tempered pocketbook.
Yeah, exactly. but I'm going to stop us to say cheers so we can all have a drink.
Cheers.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Inflation.
All right.
Hey, Mitch started already. Oh, so light and festive.
The day can begin now. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This is
Everyone gets their daily juice.
Yes.
No, this is not our daily juice. In case you're watching my boss, we do not drink this every day to start the day.
This is replacing apple juice for us now, I think.
I love it.
For sure. For sure.
We know a guy.
This is like, my first thought is it takes me to almost like, hey, because every New Year's Eve,
Cider, is that where
at
you're
12
going
o'clock,
at?
we drink Cider.
Oh,
which
yeah.
is the
Yes.
cider.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
This reminds me of
Very
that kind
much
of
so, yeah.
quality.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
That
Thank you.
brings in the new year. Does it have
I should have poured it
refreshing
like
feel?
this.
High praise.
Exactly.
High praise.
Yeah, it's also very smooth. I don't know if you noticed, like, no really bite on the tongue or anything.
Yeah, so this is typically our fall cider, so we think this pairs well with like Thanksgiving meals, with that type of food pairings. I mean, you can pair cider with whatever you want to. I mean, we are open to anybody pairing our ciders with anything.
Pop rocks, Halloween candy,
pop
pizza,
rocks,
cold pizza, whatever.
Yeah, so we go anywhere from lowbrow to very highbrow. We're welcoming to whatever. So it's the creativity again.
Yeah, and then one of the really interesting things was going back and looking at some of the judges' notes from the competition, the Governor's Cup, was the intention behind this cider was actually recognized by the palate of some of the judges, because they were like, oh, this would go great with a roast, a roast meat, roasted vegetables, root vegetables. And I don't think they knew that was my intention, but it was really cool that they got it. I was like, that's exactly what I was going for.
Exactly.
And then there's other people that are like, what? It was very subjective.
And that's always interesting when you put yourself out there from a creative standpoint, and other people are blindly tasting or blindly looking at it. It's interesting to see their feedback, and sometimes it takes us a day or two to recover once we're like, whoa, that was a little harsher than I thought. But it was, but it's always good to get the unbiased opinions of others, so we can get better, because that's the only way we improve what we do.
Exactly.
And
Well,
how we do
to
it.
appreciate maybe where they would take it that you hadn't thought of. I'm remembering, and this is for any creative endeavor, I think this is true, but I'm remembering the author Borges, who wrote a lot of short stories back in the day. He would say, once you put a short story out there,
Right.
the reader then begins to take and control of it, because they then can interpret it in ways that you didn't even think of at the time. So similar to this, someone may taste this and say, oh, this would go great with X, and you may never have thought of it, but now you've created something that they can sort of take as the taster, as the person enjoying it, in an entirely new direction.
That's right. Exactly. We have to be very careful, when we're doing our tasting notes, because we don't want to be too suggestive and putting an idea in someone's head. We really want everybody to experience it. And it's wild that you'll get, some serious outliers. They're like, what? Yeah. But then you'll see this, kind of lump in the middle, and it's like, oh, it hit that note, so it's working,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I always thought I had a terrible palate, because I was just one of those guys that I would drink whatever was put in front of me. So you could probably if it said add alcohol, it'd be like, yeah, that's great. And I know it wasn't very discerning, but it wasn't until I really started to get into this business and the wine business that I kind of understood there are nuances, but there's not a right answer. Right. I mean, I always thought there had to be I had to taste stone fruit, or I had to. And I'm like, number one, I don't even half the time know what stone fruit is, but I mean, people talk about it, and I'm like, yeah, this tastes like stone fruit, but then I'm like, oh, what is that really?
What is that? Yeah, exactly.
And so there's a lot of times that we get so caught up in the almost the legalese of wine tasting or cider tasting, and we lose what it's supposed to be all about. And for me and Don and the rest of us, it's about passion. It's about bringing people together. It's about because you can remember the time you popped open a bottle of wine or popped open a bottle of cider with somebody. It's about the feelings, the emotions that goes in. And that's really what it's all about. It's love in a bottle is what it is.
It is. This is just like I said. This brings back memories.
It does.
Beautiful. It brings back memories.
It was to the minute I took a sip.
New
the
Year's
first
Eve.
thing that popped in my head was Cider.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, and you're in a happy place.
Exactly. We're getting more bottles.
We're gonna do this every day.
Right.
Shout out Keith Smith watching the show today. Johnny Ornelas watching and sharing. Gracias, amigo del programa.
Thank you.
We got Matias Yon, Stephanie Rivara watching us today. Thank you everyone for watching us. You guys are already bringing in some great audience here. So tell us a little bit about, I'm curious, Terrestrial, what's the process by which you think of this cider, create it? I'm curious, because obviously each has its own distinction. And last time we had you on, we were talking about the one with
the Kevry cider.
Kevry cider,
levity,
right?
Yes.
But I'm curious I'm sure each one has its own genesis and process for how you want to create it.
Exactly. So I've kind of got a bit of a template with the ciders, and I've got an idea of what I'm going for, and that template is basically guided by orchard fruit. So we've got about 10 acres of orchard under leaf. It's been its different parts are 3 years old, some of it's 5 years old. So those apples that we'll find out which ones grow well in Virginia, what grow well that year, because one year to the next, one apple may do well, and the next year it doesn't do as well. So it's what the orchard provides, and that becomes the challenge. It's like, here's what the orchard gave us now. How do I get this into this idea? So like with this cider, I wanted something a little bit more tannic, not quite as acidic, but a nice bold flavor, but not too bold. I wanted it to complement, like cheeses, roast meats, and it worked. And there's a couple of things I'm going to move for the next one.
So when you say tannic, what does tannic mean? Because I know that we understand it.
Thanks for asking. That was my next question.
Seeds, stems, and skins. So
it's basically
all of those components it's the body of the apple. So when we're pressing the apple, when we're getting the juice from it, all of those skins and seeds and stems from the apple contribute to this tannic quality. That's where all of that comes from, basically.
So almost, in a sense, the difference between like a red wine and a white wine.
Exactly.
The red wine has the skin in there, thereby giving it a certain depth of flavor that you might not have in the white wine. Exactly.
Just like with rosés, you have to leave the either for an apple, a red flesh apple like a Birdford or a Redfield, we have to leave the juice on its skins for a prolonged period of time. So we bring that color in, that blush, that rosé, just like with a rosé wine. It's the same principle. And that's one of the things, too, that's really awesome is, cider in Virginia is considered wine. We're a part of the Virginia Winemakers Association. The difference between wine and cider is the fruit. It's very similar methodologies and protocols, and so really the big difference is we use apples and wine uses grapes, and then the pear comes along, as well. That's a whole other thing that kind of goes into the cider. But,
when he kind of figures out where he wants to go with it, that's how when he's talking about the different apples. So different apples bring different tannins, different acidity, and so when you're blending those together, that's how you kind of come up with what the ultimate flavor is going to be. Just like you would in a recipe. I mean, I'm oversimplifying what the Magic Don does, but just like you would in a stew or a big, when you're cooking something, it's to taste. And so there's sometimes you can say, A plus B equals C. But in this case, it's more of, he takes A plus B, but then he adds a little bit of his own. That's the magic of it. That's the skill and the artistry of it. Is that he's able to add that little bit to his palate or to where he thinks it should be going, and that's the really
probably
cool.
Something that has to be done every year in a different way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because the apples are always
absolutely
yes.
And there's always a wild card. Every one of the ciders, I've got a wild card. It's like the whole thing of if you give someone a recipe, you give them everything except for one ingredient. So they get so they can try to figure that out and they can put their own move on it. And that's what I do every single year. And it's kind of like that's what the orchard's doing to me. and to us, she's like, here's a challenge, do well or fail.
What always comes back to the terroir, right?
Exactly. Hey, Rob said terroir. We all have to drink.
Terroir. Here we go.
Yeah, so, when we talk about terroir, we're talking about microclimate, we're talking about geography, and we're talking about geology and soil chemistry. Different apples behave differently in different terroir, and we're trying to figure out oh my gosh, I haven't put more in mine. Imagine that.
I just wanted to drink more, so I was like, terroir, let's bring up that
We moved on the terroir portion of the show. Hey!
And the interesting thing, even from a microclimate perspective, when you're talking even the amount of yeah, exactly.
Look at that.
The amount of rain you have in one year can impact the juice you get. So that can actually impact the amount of alcohol, the amount of sugars in the overall ciders. So it's it's everything. And I always thought that when I first came here that more rain is better. But actually, it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, and again, even that, we're experimenting with via not intentionally, but in 2018 we had over 72 inches of rain in 10 months, and that was something we stopped counting in October.
We built an ark at one point.
Exactly.
It was pretty amazing.
Yes.
Yes. Well, it reminds me too of wine, because I remember because I'm a big fan of port.
Yes.
And in Porto, of course, the more rain gives you more yield.
Yes.
But sometimes the best vintages are the years in which you don't have a lot of rain. So you don't get a lot of grapes, but you get sometimes
really
the
good
best
stuff.
port.
And that's it. And again, that's one of the wild things about it is because there's really not a causal graph, X, Y, to plot these things against each other. It seems like you would. Like if you had a bunch of rain, then that should probably, diminish some of the quality, But we found that year that it just boomed. It just brought out qualities that we had no idea were there, and that was counterintuitive. We thought it would dilute it, and it didn't. And it's just different every single time. And that's the fun part, and that's a huge challenge, and that's where that's why we love being appreciated. For doing this, and all of our our fellow craft cider makers and winemakers that are doing this and experimenting with this, because it's a wild ride, and it's not a textbook recipe. We're always moving with it, and we can kind of get it, pretty close, but it's always going to have nuances. It's a living thing.
It is. Well, it literally. The apples on those trees are alive.
Exactly.
You guys have already made a new fan. Carrie Durganesta says she's never tried, but she's now anxious to have it last.
Come on out.
We'd love to see you.
Come on out, Carrie. Thanks, John Blair, for watching.
So I have a quick question. So, trying to look into your crystal ball.
Yes.
Not to jinx anything.
Yes.
Considering we kind of have a bit of a cold, I'd say January and February, right? But not too much rain. How are you looking at? How's the apple orchard look at?
So right now we're in what's called Silvertip, and that's the very beginning of the apple development. In the past, we're watching climate change as a reality in the orchard. And last year we had that Mother's Day frost that no one was expecting, So it had been very warm, like it's fixing to be for the next couple of weeks. It was warm. The trees were pushing out. There were flowers, petals, pink bust, all of this. And then we had a frost. And in an apple orchard, if you sustain temperatures at let's just say around 30 degrees or lower for approximately 2 hours, you ruin probably about 10% of your crop is ruined. If those temperatures are extended for another, say 6 to 8 hours, you're looking at 90% crop failure.
Oh my goodness.
And so last year we had 90% crop failure. It was devastating. But again, we had, it was wild because again, we're watching the orchard do something, and what the orchard did was all of that was wiped out. But then at the late end of the season, because usually the apple picking, harvesting is, basically around, say, August to December, usually. And we started noticing a second bloom. And we're like, whoa, because the temperatures were crazy again. It's modifying, and the trees are shifting and responding to nature. So it's really interesting to see. So this year, concerning frost, we have to do frost mitigation. We've got to do something because it is an issue, and it's affecting us. It's affecting vineyards. It's affecting all agriculture. and it's a very serious thing. So our good friend, I guess we can say that, he wouldn't mind. Our good friend Stephen Barnard, hey Stephen, from, exactly, man. Here's to Stephen. We should say Stephen Terroir.
Terroir, there you go.
And he has loaned us this creature called the Frost Dragon. Well, wait a second.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Frost Dragon is this beast that is basically a tame flamethrower that's got a giant burner.
Let's not say flamethrower on live air. So let's kind of stay away from that. But
a warming plume.
We don't want anyone to think it's
flamethrower warming.
Yeah, we are not killing trees.
Yeah, exactly.
We are helping them.
And so what that does is it's got two tiers. It's got a plume of heat that comes out at a low level, approximately about 12 inches above the ground, and then another plume that comes out around 3 feet. So that creates this little warm zone, and we think that will help. So if we do have frost, but I mean the unfortunate thing is then and again all of the orchardists and folks in the vineyard, everyone can tell you, you don't go home at 5 o'clock. It's anything agriculture is not 9 to 5. It's 25/8. And so we'll be out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, or 3 o'clock in the morning,
Maybe
or 4 o'clock in the morning.
We'll
call Rob. Rob's like,
I'll FaceTime you.
There's technology, yes, and we're working. And even with that, we found some other. There's some really cool things where technology is pushing that because we're seeing where this is going, and there is some set it and forget it kind of stuff. So there's some equipment out there that you could put in the field once the temperature is reached. That's a high threshold and low threshold, and you can cut this thing on and off. But that's more aeolian wind processes.
And that's one of those things that we have to look at in terms of what our crop yield's going to be versus what the cost of mitigation is. So sometimes, if let's say we're going, so you see the big windmills along 231 when you're driving down there, and those can be between $30,000 and $50,000 each one.
Easy.
And so you have to look at what our ultimate yield's going to be and what we're able to, the financial part of it. Absolutely. And that's kind of how we make our decisions. Because luckily for us, we have some great partners at other other orchards that kind of supplement our crop when we need it. So it's. We'd love to say it's all. Yeah, we'd love to say it's all passion, but there is a business side to it as well that we have to look at.
Of course, I think it's a good lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs out there because it's about managing. I think sometimes there's a notion of I need to spend whatever I need to get 100%.
That's right.
And sometimes it's usually say, well, what's the cost of mitigation?
Yes.
Right? Do I sometimes say, okay, do I make sure that I'm not so worried about yielding 100% or charging the right amount or so forth that I end up putting costs on myself that aren't necessary.
Yes,
exactly.
It's that business part is as passionate as you may be, right? You also want to keep it going by being a successful business.
Cash flow is king.
Yes. Exactly. And then and it's so immersive and so connected because just outside of like our orchard, well, like last year our orchard failed. So what do we do for apples? So we start calling our friends who grow apples, and we're saying, hey, we have this, do you grow this? And that's another thing. A lot of the growers are growing more cider apples because now that there's a market for that. And so some of those guys are like, no, man, don't get the windmill because, you can just buy apples from us. And we're like, so we have to measure that, exactly. And so it's fun. But again, these guys are going through the same thing, a very similar thing. But the orchards all around, everybody's got to treat each other well, and everyone does. It's a really good tribe, and we're proud to be a part of it. But everybody really works together and raising everybody up.
Absolutely. So Xavier has both a comment and a question.
Oh, right.
So his comment is, if I knew about the game, I would have come today.
He is missed.
He is missed. And at least you guys.
Don and I miss you.
We drank your portion.
There you go. We're drinking it for him. And his question is, so I guess he's seen that there's a port-like version of your cider, and so he's curious when and how do you decide to make that version of your product line?
Which one was it again?
So I guess he's seen
the port one. So we started that project, good gracious, I guess it was really hatched around 2015, 2016, and it's a long process because, it's making the cider, aging the cider, letting it come into its portness, you know, and that's a process, and that takes at least 6 months to a year for that project. So it's something that we had the foresight to get involved with, but we won't reap those benefits for a while. But now, you know, the ports that we have are indicative of something that we made basically 3-4 years ago.
Wow.
You know, and so now we're looking at, you know, re-upping that, you know, so now there's a demand, people like it, and we're selling it. So they're like, you know, when are you going to have the next one? It's like 3 years. You know, they're like, what? You know, it's like it takes time, and you know, so during that time, and we've done pretty good with having some lines that, you know, if something sells out, which we want it to.
It usually does.
And it usually does, yeah. We're very thankful for that. Then we've got something else. It's like, try this. And then, you know, there's people that are like, nope, I'll be back when you have this. And that's cool, that's fine. You know, and we'll be ready for them when it's ready.
Right, and I mean, that's the big thing that happened to us with, you know, with the terrestrial, is we only had really 4 ciders that we could actually enter into the wine competition, because everything else was sold out. And so that, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but then when you're looking at competitions, you want something to be a little bit more aged. So you want to give it a time to kind of age in the bottle a little more. So most of our ciders were green, because they were somewhat green, because they were 2020.
One was very green. We hadn't even I mean, it was still in the process. And we were like, you know what? Let's enter it and see what happens.
You never know.
And it did well.
And I didn't mean to take us really out. Well, we actually just started the process of making our next port. And so we actually just sent juice yesterday to Catoctin Creek in Sperryville?
Purcellville. Catoctin Creek.
And one of those. And they'll actually distill down 900 gallons of our Gold Rush into 100 gallons of like a 90 proof, and we'll use that both in our OG, which is our ginger cider, and we will use it perhaps in our next port and start that process. So the port, you know, takes probably takes a year's worth of planning before we actually put it into the cask or whatever we're aging it in. So it's a long process. And then the next one we have coming out is will probably be a 5-year Pommeau. That's aging in Keswick wine barrels right now.
Yes.
So patience.
So it's patience, and it's, you know, it's the patience, and also it's the patience and patience and more patience to be able to wait out the market and actually not pull it out too early. So that's the hard part, because you're balancing the money and the art of it. So it's but I think that ultimately probably next year we'll be bringing out the 5-year, and that'll be an amazing amazing cider.
Yeah.
That's gonna be
how difficult is it to wait that long?
Very. It is very, very difficult.
Like, I got to wait 5 years.
Exactly, because I mean, like, we'll taste it, you know, and we're doing this, you know, every month. We have to do this. Is, you know, one of the pitfalls of the job is you have to taste the product, and you know, because we've got to guide it. We have to see where it's doing, all the machinations that's going through, and we get to a point. It's like, that's great, that's wonderful. Let's bottle it. No. It's like, it can't get any better. Yeah, it can. You know, and it's that patience, just like, okay, let it alone, let it be. You know, don't mess it up, don't let it get too chewy, and all these things. And we really haven't had that problem yet. You know, So it's a wonderful process, and it's a great wild ride to be a part of.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this other champion here.
Yeah,
we got. My glasses.
One more time. Inflation.
Is that a big shout out, Chrissy Muniz watching, Virgil Velasco watching the show today. Thank you both for watching. So let's, while we're pouring it here, Don, tell us a little bit about
so in
this
honor
champion here, dry hopped.
Exactly. So in honor of St. Patty's Day, we brought over a bottle that had a green label. Hey,
appreciate it.
And what this is it's a dry hop cider. And this actually, there's a wonderful magazine, a publication from Seattle, from Washington, but I mean, it reaches all over the world. It's quite international in its scope and focus. And it's cider, and it's called Cidercraft. So Cidercraft magazine is phenomenal, and it really unites the entire cider world. I mean, literally, whether it's, you know, the orchardist, the cider maker, the people that supply the parts and machinery, it's everything. And they do a competition every year, and several competitions actually. And so we entered our dry hop, and the dry hop was a judge's choice winner, which we were very pleased with because, that was kind of like, ooh, so that was kind of like, maybe a bit more of a developed palate with some of the judges, and for them to recognize that was a real honor for us.
Absolutely.
So cheers to Cider Craft Magazine, and cheers to all of us and all of the Irish and Irish at heart.
Exactly, all the Irish and honorary viewers. Honorary Irish viewers.
Today we're all Irish.
Exactly, right?
Now this cider is actually one that I probably held Don back a little bit until he finally convinced me that was actually where we should go. So we'd always done like a ginger and hopped cider. And then Don discovered, and I mean, he has a much better telling of the story than I do, but he discovered this.
Not if you keep going.
Oh, sorry. Hold on.
It helps.
Oh my God, I'm the best storyteller ever. No, but he discovered this hop, and I'll let you tell the story of the hop because it's amazing. So we always use the Centennial or Citra, kind of the traditional hops that you find in most beers or a lot of ciders as well. And then Don all of a sudden came to me in a very excited state one day, and I always get a little worried when Don's doing this to me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to call the owner and give her money or something because Don's on his passion project. But it actually turned out quite well, as you guys can taste. But
yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about?
So it's a Zappa hop. It's named for Frank Zappa and the Zappa family, the Zappa musical legacy. So there was a hop that was found in the mountains of New Mexico, a wild hop. And I'm like going through, and again, we've got friends, Dave Warwick, from Three Notch, who's a hop expert. And anytime that we do our hop cider, we always get Dave. He's awesome because he's got such a great palate. And we're like, what do you think about this? And we found through him and some other friends of ours that are beer makers, wine makers, all this stuff. We get together and we taste these things and where do we want to go? And so we found that Citra and Centennial are really strong kind of IPA hops, and they really complement the apple. I mean, we tried like probably about 50 different hops, and we really liked those two. But I wanted something else. So I was like, that's cool, but I want to do something different. And like just out of nowhere, all of a sudden Zappa shows up, and I'm a huge Frank Zappa fan. And I'm like, Rob, and he's like, what? And I'm like, we got to do this. He's like, you haven't tried it? I was like, no. He's like, well, because traditionally what we'll do is we'll do a small batch. We'll do like a gallon or something, and make sure that it's worthwhile us pursuing this. And I just went for it.
But Don is actually an amazing drummer as well. I mean, he's very humble about it, and you'll never hear him talking about it. But he's a musical talent as well. I mean, I remember the first time my brother saw, who's a drummer as well, saw Don drumming. He's like, do you see what he's doing? I was like, yeah, he's drumming. I mean, I can see that. He's like, no, do you see all the techniques he's using? They're amazing. And so Don has a big musical background, and so that's why it really played to his heart on this one. And actually, the heart,
the heart spoke true.
Yeah, it did amazing.
Fantastic.
Yes.
It was really cool because what you'll find, and this is a little over-carbonated. It ended up being a little bit more carbonated than I wanted it to be. But anyway, the next round.
We'll say effervescent.
I can say it's made for a very impressive
exactly, right?
fountain while it was going here.
It's gorgeous. But yeah, so the Zappa hop actually adds this little notion of white flour, and I say fruity pebble. If you've ever eaten Fruity Pebbles as a kid or as an adult,
we're very technical at Castle Hill.
Exactly. And it adds this little note, this floral sweet note, and then it drops back down into a more.
It does. I noticed as soon as the scent, the aroma comes super readily to this one. That reminds, for a moment you scent it right, and you're like, am I about to drink beer?
Yes, exactly.
And then you taste it, and it's not. Instead, it's fruit. Like you said, it has that fruity quality. It's almost, that deceptive quality when you smell something and the scent tells you what you're about to drink might be sweet.
Yes, absolutely.
And then you drink it, and it's not.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
And but it still has that certain.
When it first touches your tongue, you're kind of thinking that's going to be sweet, but then it kind of just mellows out at the end. It's very interesting. Yeah,
exactly.
It's just it's just like a
beautiful,
like a good cocktail is the same way. Like like an old fashioned. If you actually make an old fashioned correctly, you're actually rubbing the orange around the outside of the glass. So then you get that aroma. And so as we, first we, eat and drink with our eyes, and then, it's our nose, and then we taste it. So if you can hit all three, then you're just, you've hit the trifecta on that.
Exactly.
Exactly. No, it's excellent. It's just really great quality to it.
Awesome, thank you.
Also festive in its own way.
Exactly, and it became, and we have a lot of events at Castle Hill, a lot of weddings, which is fantastic. And so our event coordinator, director, Laura Blair, has been very good at getting, kind of steering the wedding party into a his and hers cider, so like the hers, and this is not, by all means the end all to be all and defined, and I'm not going to get into that.
We're open to everyone.
Everything is cool.
You can drink whatever you like.
So, yes, exactly. There are no rules.
It's just an amazing idea, so you should do it.
So like there's typically we'll have the rosé, this kind of blush rosé, pink, red.
Rosé all day.
We'll have rosé all day, and then we have the dry hop. So we'll get a lot of gentlemen that come up to the cidery that do not like cider. They've had it, they don't like it, and they're 9 times out of 10, if it's one of those gentlemen, it'll usually be, I'm a beer drinker, I drink whiskey, or something like that. It's like, okay, well, we got you. So we'll give them the hop, because again, it's gluten free. Most all ciders are gluten free. And, this has hops in it. And so they're like, whoa, I recognize that. So then you can kind of get the beer drinker there. And then if you find the guy that, only likes whiskey or whatever, then we hand them a port or a pommeau. And that's aged in, Basil Hayden whiskey barrels, Woodford Reserve, rum, all this stuff. So then we've got them in the barrel world. And then they're like, and it's like, okay. And then we've got them.
Yes.
And the women you already got down with them in, right?
Exactly, and they're good. But then, and believe me, again, there's no rules, because we have a group of women that come out and just destroy the ports. Like in the summer, they will come out and, it's 18% ABV, it's 18% sugar, and it's delicious, and as Xavier noted, thank you. But they were drinking it in the summer, and I was like, because, traditionally it's served cellar temperature, which would be, around like 55, 60 degrees, something like that. And outside, it's a little warmer in the summer. And we had some copper cups that we were doing the Landy Mule, another cocktail that our director of operational sales, what did she retail? I don't know. Anyway, Josephine.
Yes.
Hi, Josephine. She came up with this with the help of CJ, I believe, and a couple of other folks. Yes. This thing called the Landy Mule, and it was served in a copper mug. So these ladies were pouring the port over one ice cube with a spearmint leaf we have a little herb tray on every table, so people can doctor their stuff up if they want to, and it's just kind of there because it's cool, and you can put it on your fingers and you get oils and everything. But these ladies were putting it in their drink, and they were crushing it. I was just like, I wasn't expecting that, to see this table of little older ladies just
I can attest to that, because when our mom tasted that, remember, all she could say, oh my God, that was so good. She absolutely loved it. Yes. She probably drank my dad's.
Right. We'll work that out, Xavier.
You tasted it on air. Exactly. I get to drink yours. Yeah. Shout out Anthony Adelphio watching, Lucrecia Morales watching the show today. Everyone enjoying this. So, and the beautiful part is that in this season now, there's so much. I think you guys are now, Castle Hill, you can go out there, 12 to 7, Thursday through Sunday.
Yes.
And you've got some little snackables people can have with it.
Yeah, our kitchen game stepped up.
So April 1st, we're actually changing the hours. So as we get into daylight savings, and we're still kind of fine-tuning the hours, but we're believing that they're going to be 2 to 9. So that we can take advantage of the greater sunlight, as well as the just people getting off work and making sure that we have plenty of time to be open. So we will be changing that, but we'll publish that on castlehill.com, or else you can look on Instagram as well, or our Facebook page. We'll have it posted in all those different places once we figure it out. But you're exactly right, 12 to 7 right now, and then we will be opening a little later.
Definitely Thursday through Sundays.
Yes, and then we actually brunch. Yes, Sunday brunch.
It's amazing.
That's amazing, yeah. And I'm not going to say what she did, but the amazing Lauren in the kitchen, She came up with a way to make French toast that just blew my mind. And she uses one of the ports in a reduction and whatnot.
Oh, my goodness.
And she's like, what do you think of this? I'm like, like grabbed it and ran with it, and just eating it, covered in it.
Everything.
Now the cool thing, I'll actually say this from a operational standpoint that works well, is that, from a farm winery perspective, we can't go from raw.
Right.
So she had to figure out a way around that so we could actually present a French toast, and that's when she figured out the ice cream and the... Oh, sorry, I was just supposed to say that, but the secret ingredients that go into it. But it's
you sold me. Once you said it, I'm in.
You know what? All you have to do is say ice cream. Let's just start saying that too. Yes. Yeah, I mean, on a different note, ice cream. Okay, back to what you were talking about.
But they. You're making me laugh. Your laugh is making me laugh.
I promise you, it's not that we've been drinking cider. It
is partially drinking this.
Yeah, exactly. It's company. Hey.
Company.
Cheers.
Terroir.
Yeah, inflation.
No, we will start offering some live music out there as well.
Awesome.
Thursday nights, check out our events page on the on our website as well as Facebook. We are doing a 231 festival, so there's a lot of amazing things that are happening out on the 231 corridor.
And that is May 15th, I believe, a Sunday.
Mm-hmm, May 15th, a Sunday. We're finalizing the acts right now, but we're presenting it with the Daily Progress is actually partnering with us on that, so it'll be a rather large event.
Yes.
And we're I think the beneficiary of that's going to be the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank.
Wonderful. So basically, you get to support a good cause.
Yes.
Be there with a bunch of great people on a beautiful May Sunday. So in other words, you should mark your calendar.
Try some of that French toast.
That may or may not have ice cream involved.
We will have food trucks out there. SPCA is going to be bringing dogs out for adoption. So there's something for everyone. There's a kids area. So there's a train coming with a conductor that you can put your kids on and forget about them while you sit over and drink. No, I'm just kidding. You have to watch your children. We are not babysitting them for you. But
grab your cider and get on the train with them.
Exactly.
Which one of you two is going to take over watching the people's kids, though?
Not me.
Not me.
Me. We did that. So we do a wassail every year, and one year the idea was the children were making, and the adults, the children at heart, were making festive signs
on sticks.
They were kind of like masks and hair and all this kind of stuff. And what we found was our intention was that, but the second the kids found the wooden dowels, it's time to fight.
Yeah,
it's sword fighting time.
Sword fighting.
And then we're like, what? Like kids getting poked? They're like, oh my gosh! And then the cleanup afterwards, there was just broken sticks everywhere.
Let me just do the disclaimer: no one was hurt during this.
No,
and there was nobody that was no liability there.
Not at all. But that was when we saw like the parents just kind of go, they were like, no, we're not going to police your kids.
They know their kids. Let them sword fight.
But there will be face painting out there. I mean, so it's a great event. We're so excited about it. We haven't been able to do big events for a while, so this has actually been about 2 years in the planning.
Wonderful.
So we started right before, and I think I'm allowed to mention it, COVID came into our lives, and so we had all these big plans for that year, and so it's so exciting for us to see like that planning plus the new planning come to fruition, get that energy, and because our thing is we want to bring more people out to us. So we'll have Keswick Winery there, Well Hung, Horton will be there.
Patch. Mary Mill. So there's all this stuff going on 231. I mean, there's, it's a thriving...
Oh, it is. I mean, it's one after another.
Yes, and it's just, and so now people come out and they're like, wait, there's a lot of stuff to do here. I can make a day out of it. Wait, is there a bed and breakfast? Can I stay somewhere? Like, yes, you can. So Rob has been vanguard with this and getting this going, and he's worked with a lot of great folks So it should be great. And there's more people jumping on board as well as the word kind of gets out. People are like, hey, you know.
Of course, why not?
Exactly. Are we going to have vendors? Are vendors going to be there?
There's going to be vendors. We're still working on the list right now, but there'll be people out there selling their wares, local artists.
Cool.
We're always happy to support the local community whenever we can. I mean, that's, you know, part of our mantra, both from a, you know, agriculture standpoint and from a, you know, Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, kind of trying to help out our neighbors, because, you know, not everyone is you know, abundantly blessed. So we want to, you know, help those that maybe just need a little bit of a hand for a little bit of time. So it's you know, that's what, you know, besides the passion, that's the stuff that makes it worthwhile to get up every day and do what we do, is that type of you know, the giving back.
And plus, people like to gather. People are tribal by nature, I think. You know, it's like communal. You know, it really goes towards that and getting everyone celebrating again.
And,
you know,
and this is the value of supporting local small business, because you know, when you support something like Castle Hill, what you're doing is it's coming back to the community in all the different ways. In the agricultural people you work with, in the events you're putting on, in the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, you know that it's not being shipped off.
Nope.
Your hard-earned dollars aren't being shipped off somewhere else. It's right here.
Correct. Exactly. It goes right back into the local economy. You know, that's the whole thing.
Which is the beauty of it.
Exactly.
Having you guys on is always just such a pleasure.
It was such a pleasure.
Oh my gosh,
we love being here.
Y'all.
It is just so fantastic.
Yes.
And thank you for bringing these two champions.
Of course. I hope you enjoyed them.
I'm going to say ta-ra.
Ta-ra! Hey!
So, and cheers. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. Happy St. Patty's Day. Inflation.
And eventually we want to have you guys out to us.
Absolutely. I know Mike and Nick have already been.
Yes, we've been very lucky to see that. By the way, before we leave, anything else in the Keveries?
Yes. So we're doing, the Keveries are wonderful. I mean, it's quite its own laboratory. And what we're working with right now is seasonality in the Keveries. So in the past, traditionally, our Kevery cider was made from winter and then brought out in the spring. Yes, sir?
What's a Kevery?
Kevery is the oldest known fermentation vessel in the history of history, recorded history. It goes back 6,000 to 8,000 years. It's terracotta. Ours are made in the Republic of Georgia.
Oh, you mean amphora?
No, amphora would imply that it's movable and probably has handles. Ours are buried in the ground.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And it's below the thermal gradient?
Yeah, so there's a geothermal gradient that monitors and kind of keeps the temperature in check, so it's staying approximately about 55 degrees, which is a perfect ferment. Yes. But we're finding, you know, that as the ground warms up during the warmer months, it does increase. But we're finding out what those deviations are, and it's guiding our cider program out there. So we're working at doing a seasonal, you know, spring, summer, winter, fall, you know, or spring, summer, fall, winter, in the Kevery. And we'll see, because you know, at that point, then you're tasting not only the terroir,
yes,
but you're also tasting seasonality. And that's a whole other thing. That adds a whole other dimension, and that's a whole lot of fun.
And actually, before we let you go, one viewer question.
Yes.
Anthony W. asked, how does cider age compared to wine?
Very similarly in the making process, but then once it's bottled, wine tends to age a lot better. We've got ciders that are 10 years old, that are you know, shelf stable, they're fine. I'm not sure what the oldest ones are exactly, but
we have 2012.
Right.
That still drinks all right.
I've got a 2010. You know, and
so just, I mean, it depends on the amount of alcohol.
Yeah, the amount of alcohol. The higher the alcohol, the more stable it's going to be. And usually, yes. And so ours end up being, you know, traditionally most of the cider fruit in our orchard in Virginia, that will ferment out to about 8 to 9% ABV, whereas, you know, a wine is going to be a higher ABV, typically, you know, 11, 14 and beyond. So that, I think, you know, lends itself to the stability of the product. But cider will, you know, the whole idea is, you know, as far as we're concerned, you know, age it if you want to, but drink it if you can.
Love it. Love it. That's the motto. I think we'll end with there.
Well, I like the drinking part.
Right?
Age it if you want to. Otherwise, drink it if you can.
Yes, thank you.
There we go, gentlemen.
We appreciate you guys having us on today.
Thanks
so much.
Pleasure as always.
Pleasure as always.
Yes.
All right, we'll see you all in the castle.
Yes, we will. We will see you guys there.
Fantastic.
We'll bring on Nickolas now. He's gonna do a swap over here. Don't worry, Nick. I've saved you. Oh, he's getting his own. He's getting his own before he comes on. Shout out Denny Campbell watching the show today. Travis Marion watching the show. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Anthony Delvio, for your great question. I think we've got another great comment here as we bring on Nick for the show. Denny Campbell watching, saying surprised and present. He's happy to be here watching the show today. And Dave Warwick says, love them boys and everything they're doing at Castle Hill. So lots of props for our Castle Hill.
It's exciting. It looks like it's going to be exciting spring / summer.
It is. I mean, I can foresee a lot of Urpí Sundays and Saturdays heading out to Castle Hill. And
lots of smiles and full tummies.
Exactly. And just enjoying beautiful times. That may or may not involve ice cream.
May not involve ice cream, but will definitely involve cider.
Yes, exactly. It will 100% involve cider. Everything else we can't spoil, whether or not it will involve ice cream. So for those who don't know him, this is Nickolas Urpí. He's the CMO of Emergent Financial Services. He is the third of the Urpí brothers.
Yeah, and somewhat shorter than Don, so I had to lower the microphone to make sure I was.
This way
everyone can hear me.
And actually, so I think this is the first time that we've had all three Urpí brothers on the show, but not the father.
Right. Cheers. No inflation. No Xavier.
Inflation.
Wow, that's good.
So isn't that good?
No, that's very good. It's excellent.
Excellent.
I can see it having that beery quality. I'm surprised Levity didn't win because I loved it. I thought it should have won its own award because it was just so good. Just like unique. Create a category just for it and then make it win, you know?
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Next year.
So absolutely. To follow up that
Nick,
great
I know you've got some. I know.
I
have to follow that, but
with some dull stuff.
Will try with some dull. But it's not dull. But speaking of, we've been talking for weeks on the show, and Xavier and myself, with just the notion of how do you talk about expenses that people may face when dealing with an environment involving inflation. Cheers for that. And so one of the things that I think people often worry about is, okay, given everything that's going on, given prices increasing, when I retire, am I going to have some massive load of expenses? I mean, do I have to adjust my expenses? Do I need to worry about things? And you've been doing some research.
Well,
Michael's been doing some research that has been studies that have been done on this.
Well, right, because, and actually Xavier touched on this on his Tuesday tips on Tuesday, so you can go check that out, anyone who's watching, for a more concise version of what we're going to say here. But one of the things that we look at, right, because there's a lot of standards when it comes to financial planning and retirement research that, sometimes it's good when you're a financial planner to review and why is this the case? Are things changing? Because we know the economy is changing, the investment world is changing. So how do we stay on top of it? So one interesting thing is that the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College does these briefs that actually they're really great. They're really short, and they dive into these topics and ask the questions and then try to piece apart why. Right. So one of the things that we always notice is that you hear in financial planning that as soon as someone retires, their expenses they consume less, right? Their expenses go down. So the question was, is that something that they do intentionally, retirees, or is it something that they are forced to do by circumstances, right? So one of the things they look
intentionally versus circumstances, you're saying, is that something that when you retire you tend to spend less, or you have no choice but to spend less to make your
right? So conventional thinking is that when you retire, you're not driving to work, you're not buying the clothing you need to go to work, you're probably you're not eating out lunches as much. So there's all these things that you're not spending money on. Now, obviously, on the flip side, there's a lot of people that spend money on hobbies, and that's one of the things that the first thing that came into my mind is, well, what if you have an expensive hobby? Right, because Xavier has a garden.
You wouldn't think of as expensive. Well,
you don't realize how expensive they are, right? I mean, all of a sudden you want to build a garden, you got to buy the wood, you got to buy the shovels, you got to buy. I mean, just from us having a small garden in the back, we know how many things Xavier's had to find out that he needs
that they can script into labor.
Yeah, I know exactly right. And with the inflation and working, it's cheers.
We might have to raise our prices, boys.
Yeah, right. I know. Start sending bills to Xavier, Urpí Landscaping. But so one of the questions, so Xavier and I have always been a little bit tentative to use the numbers that are standard, right? Standard number was 30%, right? As soon as you retire, you drop the expenses by 30%, that's what people are spending. We've never been comfortable with that because we're not exactly from just having conversation with the clients, you realize
just the experience of
they're like, I don't know where I would cut 10%, much less 30%. So one of the things we looked at is like, okay, let's dig deeper into this. And luckily, the Center for Retirement Research does, they do the studies, they call up people, they do the analysis, and it turns out that their results were if you are in poor financial condition or in poor health, you are more likely to spend less. And those are the key things, right? If you enter,
so you have no choice.
You have no choice financially, and you have no choice.
You don't feel well,
right? Because then you're not going out. So the interesting thing about the health one is if you are in slightly poor health, if you're in poor health, it becomes a parabola. Initially, you spend less because you're not going out, you're not traveling, but then at the end of your life, you start spending a lot more because medical expenses start going up a lot more. Whereas people who have not saved appropriately, their investments didn't pan out, whatever the case may be, they didn't realize they had to plan for retirement, weren't prepared, or, they start realizing that they need to spend less because they literally cannot afford their lifestyle when they're not working. So they start spending less. But people who are in excellent health and in excellent financial condition actually don't spend a tremendous, they still spend less, but it turns out it's roughly if I'm correct, it is 0.6% less per year.
Which is not very significant.
Which is
certainly nowhere near 30.
It's not 30% right off the bat. It ends up being, I think, I didn't highlight that part. 0.6 per year, it ends up being like over like 15 years, it's something like 10, 12%. But again, that's spread over the duration. So it's not immediate and it's not initial. So you can't, because again, like we've had conversations with clients who are like, well, when I retire, I kind of want to travel more. I want to see things, I want to go places. So that's going to increase your budget, your expenses. That will cover, maybe you're not spending that much on gas, but if you're taking a plane to Europe, that's going to be expensive. That's going to be a lot, and especially so you need to make sure that you're adequately prepared. That you can't just automatically cut. And that's one of the things about these standards is that they need to be reviewed, they need to be updated, and you need to make sure you're on top of it and have the conversation with the client because you can't just assume.
Exactly, and I think it shows just the importance of the personal financial planning touch. In other words, you can't just go online to a website, plug in your information, and have the machine churn out. Because the machine might be churning out a 30% reduction in expenses at retirement that you sit there and say, I'm in good health, I have a lot of things that I plan to do, I don't intend to cut my expenses 30% the moment that I retire. That's absurd to me. So you speak with someone who's a professional and that you can have a relationship with and say, okay, this is my lifestyle, these are my goals, these are things that I love to do, and figure out what's more reasonable. Because what we found, and you did speak to this here, and Michael as well, that a lot of times people are not cutting their expenses by anywhere near 30%. You're looking more like 10 to 15.
Right.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Given inflation, how much harder will it be to...
I see what you did there. That was clever.
I had to make sure I threw it in one question. But given inflation, how much harder will it be for people to cut down expenses? Because if it's already tough enough to bring them down 10 to 50%, considering prices are going up on everything, whether it's gas or groceries, like how are they going to find a way to cut down?
This segment's on fire. But I think one of the that's a great question because unfortunately we have seen the impact of inflation.
Cheers! Oh, I see what you did there too. That's clever.
No. We have seen the impact on financial plans. It's been mostly negative. A lot of people have been in a great position where their returns have allowed them to outpace it a little bit. But we've also seen that a lot of people have not, right? Especially if you're getting older, right? Because as you approach retirement, you can't take the kind of risk that you have.
Think about we've seen it at CPIs at 7%, 7.5%. Think about how much risk you have to take in the stock market to get 8% to outpace that.
Right.
If you're 65, 70 years old, you shouldn't be investing in assets that are generating 8-9% because those are assets that are also riskier. So that's the challenge.
So
it becomes more difficult to outpace.
But going back to Mikey's question, that makes it so much harder to cut expenses. That like we're looking now like at, and Xavier and I, when we do these plans, and I have him review it, we try to, because part of what I like to say a financial plan does is it looks for the holes in your financial life. It's looking for the weaknesses, right? It's kind of like the Sun Tzu kind of mentality of like, what is your weakness? We need to turn that into a strength, right? You need to like, it's very philosophical, but the idea is that you're trying to find a place that you can improve on, or to find out where you're going to be at risk. And so the first thing we do is try not to reduce expenses at all. And we fire test and we say, okay, you go right into retirement, you live the same lifestyle you lived when you were working.
What happens?
What happens? Let's see if you can make it like that with the inflation that it is. And God bless a lot of people, they can do it and it's great. So like we can, and sometimes we always do a worst case scenario where returns don't live up to,
don't outpace inflation.
They don't outpace inflation. I see what you did there. This segment gets so much greater when we're drinking. So where it doesn't outpace inflation, and then I lost my train of thought.
No, in other words, if it doesn't outpace it, that can produce some challenges.
Right.
In the financial plan.
Right.
But the interesting thing is sometimes, though, and what we've seen, to sort of answer Michael's question in a different way, if you can have that initial reduction, you're lessening the impact of inflation.
Right.
Because if you think about it, let's say you've got, just use a number, because most people don't have anywhere near this number of expenses, but let's say you had $100,000 worth of expenses, and inflation's running at 7%. Right? That's, over the course of a year, a $7,000 increase.
Right.
Right, that you would expect in your expenses. But let's say you're able to cut those expenses when you retire from $100,000 to $90,000 a year. Well, now suddenly the force of prices going up is no longer impacting $100,000. It's only impacting 90, right? And 90 times 7% inflation is 6,300 increase. So you've saved yourself. In other words, you're cutting down expenses by $10,000, by 10%. Not only saved you that $10,000, it saved you another $700 that would have been subject to increasing prices, but instead it's not.
Well, one of the things...
And so it can be very impactful, and if especially considering sometimes in financial planning you have to assume a rate of inflation at 3% in perpetuity. They come up some money
5% sometimes. So we do 5% as the worst case scenario. Like it stays at 5%, which is, I mean, if it stayed at 5%, it would be incredibly difficult.
Worse problems than just inflation.
But you also want to see if somebody can, how do they stand up to a 5% inflation number?
Stress test.
So it is exactly. And one of the things that I also wanted to bring up was the fact that we don't, because a lot of standards also say that, well, technically incomes rise over time, so you're going to make those also subject to rising, they're going to rise with inflation. That's not necessarily the case. We don't believe that's the case, so we try not to do that as well. So, like, we really put people's financial plans through a ringer to see how they make it. And a lot of times, what Xavier and I, especially what we come up with when we're looking at this, with these expenses is, there's options. Like, it's not that people have to cut expenses. Sometimes what it is that we can look, okay, here's your specific issue, right? You're spending, you're not going to make it to the point at which we've decided as you're comfortable with. So you can do lots of things. You can work longer. You can, either try to have somebody else can join, like have a part-time. You can work part-time long after you retire. So like there's different ways of maneuvering. And what we do is we always present the client with, these are your options. Which is the one that's best for you? Because a lot of people would rather just cut expenses. They'd rather be, I can find 10% out of my budget because I'd rather not work. And sometimes they're like, if I work 1 or 2 years, I can add 4 to 5 years of longevity. I'd rather do that. So it's really going to depend. A lot of it also depends on, a lot of things. One big factor that I make sure people are aware of is that Social Security does not exist isolated from your financial plan. It's part of it. So a lot of times people, they tend to think, well, Social Security is its own thing. I'm going to find out how to best take advantage of it. And in reality, sometimes it makes more financial sense to take it early so that you fill in the gap between when you retire and when you want to start withdrawing from your savings. Because I always say it's kind of interesting, a lot of people have, a very, very heavy, very well-funded retirement account, which you can grow, or at least we can hope can grow about 5%. Well, that 5% that it's growing is a bigger chunk than the 8% that Social Security would be growing. Right, because it's bigger.
Dollar amount, exactly.
Dollar amount. So you got to be thinking dollar amount.
Significant enough, you'd have more dollars from the 5% growth in your retirement account than the 8% growth in Social Security. It's based off a smaller number.
Right. So you take that piece, you add it to your financial. Like you take it earlier, even though, like in isolated, you may say, I may, the break even, you start looking at the break even, maybe I would want to take it a little later and save my money.
If you just read the Social Security handbook, you'd sit there and say, wow, Social Security grows at 8% a year.
Might as well wait till full 70. Retirement, yeah.
Wait till 70 and that.
Yeah,
but in certain specific situations, depending on what your personal financial life looks like, you may be better off taking it at an earlier age. But if you sit there and say, the growth on my assets is just too significant.
Yeah, it's much more. And to be honest with you, you can get a point at which maybe if you saved that if you kind of like subsidize your spending with your Social Security for like 4 or 5 years, you can get a point where what you're making in income and cash flow on your retirement savings is sufficient to cover your expenses. And so what you're doing is two things. Now you have your Social Security piece. You're not touching your principal as much because you're making all your cash flow, and so then your withdrawal rate goes down. Because another thing financial planners look at is there's the withdrawal rate, how much you're taking out of your
the principal of your
savings, or the entire market value of your savings per year for your retirement. And obviously you want that to be as low as possible. Standard is 4%. That is also changing, right? Because a lot of people are saying, a lot of financial planners are saying they're seeing it much more safe at 2.5% to 3%.
Interesting.
Right? But if you can get that low, even if it's just getting it lower from 6% to 4%, that's a big win because it's adding longevity, which means your assets will be safer longer, right? It will be able to hold you through to an older age, maybe take care of some medical expenses, or if at the very least you have something that you can pass on to your descendants.
To the next generation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, there's so much I think that's important to think about and not be scared off by the word inflation. I think this covers like 5 times we said it.
Well,
but not be scared off by that word.
Yeah.
And realize it's not as though you have no options.
Yeah.
Like you have options that many people end up taking.
Right.
Maybe not the 30% number, but the 0.6% a year that is just natural, even for healthy people. And it's not as though it's the end of the world. You need to just not panic, be calm, don't make financial errors, and there are options that are available to you to try to see you through this.
Right. I mean, and that's the important of what we also do on the portfolio management side, right? Because I know Michael's done all this research when we look at funds and ETFs to make sure that the cash flow is there. Mm-hmm. And you guys obviously can speak to that better because you guys are more informed on the portfolio management decisions. But the whole point is all of that is part of your financial plan. So like this research is great because it helps us understand people's spending habits better, but at the same time it doesn't mean that there aren't any solutions, or that we don't want. The whole point is we don't want people to be pushed into a situation where they are forced to make decisions that they don't want to make because they can't afford it. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't want people to get to a point where the lifestyle they want to live to the best of their abilities, they can't do because they don't realize that there are options or ways of making that happen earlier in life. Mm-hmm. So
it's important. No, this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate the insight.
I didn't get a chance to drink to the word terroir, so I'm going to say terroir.
Cheers on that. No, just a couple. I'll close with a couple comments we got.
Oh, wow.
Lucrezia. Well, I'll close I'll do the Xavier's comment first when he says that the year-end bonus got lower for the CMO. I'm guessing your crap earlier about
what?
I'm guessing was something you said cost you.
Or maybe he just decided.
He just doesn't like me, so he's
on
like
the show. So I'm just gonna drop his year-end bonus, and then Lucrecia Morales, wonderful person, our good friend from Sombreros,
hola,
says saludos chitos, excelente programa.
Thank you,
Muchísimas
Lucrecia.
gracias, Lucrecia. Siempre es un placer cuando puedes.
And I was gonna say, cider goes really well with the food they've got at Sombreros.
Exactly. Latino food and a little cider sidra is what you want.
It's the best.
Absolutely. This has been fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me on as a guest.
Of course, it's fun to have you on as a guest. It's much better as a guest than a co-host. Michael, thanks for being my co-host.
The audience can understand me in 15-minute intervals.
Exactly. 15 minutes is
Thank you, Jerry.
Jerry is always such a gentleman.
Yeah.
Saying that's not true. But this was fantastic. Next week also going to be super great. We're going to have on, I'd like to call him like a super Latino duo.
There we
Ricardo Duran, he's the Hispanic segment mortgage supervisor at UVA Community Credit Union, and David Villa.
We had a great cup of coffee with those two guys a couple weeks ago. Yeah,
fantastic guys. So they're going to come on the show next week, as well as Lauren and Kristen from Heyday Antiques and Vintage. Mm-hmm. So a local business, as well as some super Latino professionals that we've got.
I have to act surprised, even though I'm the one who booked them. Like, oh, interesting. Great guest. So I was like, wow.
Oh, how did you get
I have to pretend I'm Xavier for the week because he never knows he's coming on.
You have to say, Alex, how did you get those guests?
Well, the CMO.
I have my ways.
Who deserves a raise.
I have a CMO that does this for me. But really always just appreciate so much both of you. I liked the Urpí brothers. Just back and forth.
Yeah, once in a while we could have a movie segment too, since we love the movies.
There we go. We can talk some. Touch some movies.
We take your 15
baseball, which is now 15-1.
15-1. Wow.
Harkening, so you should definitely go check them out.
UVA, thankfully, the basketball team won last night. They edged out.
It's
not the NCAA tournament, but
a win is a win is a win.
A win is a win.
A win is a win.
At least we're still seeing them play basketball, right?
Exactly. We still get to see some basketball, some baseball, enjoying the season, some lacrosse, which is excellent this year as well. Just always appreciate it. Shout out to Xavier. We miss you.
Kinda.
Wish you were here. I have to say that.
Kinda.
And of course, always appreciate Emergent Financial Services, our presenting sponsor, as well as our partners at the Gym CVille. Get out there and enjoy.
They're having a March
sale.
Special,
March sale on membership for the Gym CVille.
Today we don't go to the gym, but tomorrow after the corned beef and the
tomorrow we go to the gym. Aqua CVille Hand Car Wash, Castle Hill Cider, Serious Craddock Insurance, our friend Miguel and Chick, and Vitae Spirits, of course. Also got the new menu.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting.
Menu is coming, some events up there, as well as GBS Financial Services, our friend Johan Torres, a really great accountant.
He's going to be
busy. He's busy now,
for
sure.
Yeah.
A lot of Latino businesses and other businesses in our area working with him to make sure their taxes look good for the season ahead. And just appreciate all of our partners there. Of course, for Adelante, the premier Latino networking group. Love being here on the I Love CVille Network set. Thanks for Jerry being in studio with us. And Judah behind the camera, making us look good. And you, our audience, of course, which I just really appreciate the audience's comments and feedback today. Yeah.
Great questions, actually.
Great questions, great comments. Got some new people that didn't know about Castle Hill to head on out there.
Cider brings out the best of people here and virtually.
And there we go. Absolutely. So just really appreciate you watching. Be sure to send us any questions, comments you have after the show. Like and share. Other entrepreneurs, businesses in the area you want us to feature on Today Mañana, reach out to us. Let us know. We love doing it. It's part of the fun that we love for Today Mañana. Just thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you all next week. But until that time, hasta mañana.